everybody and welcome back to the United Stand, and we are covering Erik ten Hag's press conference, the highly anticipated press conference from Erik ten Hag. 3 media outlets were banned from this press conference, including the MEN, including NBC, including Sky. I think there was more actually. Rob Dawson was banned from the ESPN as well. Who else was banned? The Daily Mirror was banned. There was quite a few media outlets banned from this press conference because of stories that they'd put out into the media, and Manchester United claims it wasn't because of the stories they put out, it was because they didn't come to Manchester United for comment on them stories, to contextualise them so they could comment on them and they could discuss it together. And Erik ten Hag does talk about it in his press conference. It's a really interesting one. Erik ten Hag doesn't give much away again, and I'm going to be honest, I wasn't very happy with a few of these answers. I get it, he's backing the players, he's sort of in a place where he has to now, because it is make or break for Erik ten Hag. We're in serious, dangerous territory. We're in muddy waters right now. We really are. I feel like if Erik ten Hag right now, there's a sea that's got shark-infested waters in there, and I feel like someone's like threatening to tilt some blood into the sea, and they're all just going to come circling towards him. He's really kind of on edge right now, and I don't think he should be, but he is, especially with the fixture list we've got. He knows that. He's come out, he's backed the dressing room, he's backed the players in a way he kind of has to. But I really wish he would give a little bit more in these press conferences and really talk about the truth, to be honest with you. In this press conference, Erik ten Hag excused a little bit the performance and the work rate, which I didn't like. And he didn't really tell the full story in how Man United have been. He speaks about the way that we have scored great goals against Galatasaray and Everton, but we're not going to talk about the fact that we conceded nearly 100 shots in our last 5 games. It's ridiculous. So I am a little bit frustrated with some of these answers, but I also kind of understand where he's coming from as well. But let's get into it. So he starts off, he says, we had a week of 2 good performances and 1 bad performance, so there we carry on. The team is going in a good direction. I get that. A lot of people say, well, Galatasaray wasn't a good performance. And arguably, you could say Everton wasn't really as well. Everton easily could have equalised. They easily could have gone on and won the game. So you look at that and you think, 2 good performances? To be honest with you, the Galatasaray game, we should have won. We should have won it 3-0 or 3-1. Anana's mistakes cost us that game. That would have been a great away win if Anana hadn't messed up their mistakes. Going to be honest. But the Everton game, yeah, it was a good win, but there was warning signs in that game as well. And this is what I'm worried about with Erik ten Hag. He will know this himself. You know, he's a coach. He's a Manchester United coach. He's a highly, highly capable coach. He will know that all 3 of them performances wasn't good enough. The Newcastle one absurdly wasn't good enough. But coming out to the media and saying we had 2 good games, well, we didn't really, because Everton, we were basically papering over the cracks. Garnacho scored a wonder goal, and we scored 2 good goals. We got a penalty. But Everton easily could have equalised and gone on to win that game. And then Galatasaray midweek, yeah, fair enough. You probably coached it to be a 3-0 or 3-1 game. But at the end of the day, and Anna did make them howlers, and it's results-based business, and you've drawn it, and we could be out of the Champions League. So realistically, it's not a great week for Manchester United. The Everton game was a good win, but the Galatasaray draw wasn't great for us, and the Newcastle game was absolutely horrendous. It wasn't just a poor game; it was atrocious, really, and there should be no excuse for it. He says, we play very good football. We scored goals against Galatasaray, against Everton, and against Newcastle we didn't play great. We knew that. We're not happy with the performance, but although we stayed in the game, we had 2 good opportunities to get a point. With a little bit more determination, we could have taken something. That is majorly glass half full, because that Newcastle game, there wasn't anything in that for Man United, and if we did get anything, it would have been undeserved. We got battered from pillar to post, and that's the truth of it. Ten Hag says, we are still in the ranking. Of course, we dropped, but we are not too far away, so we're okay. Basically there, I think he's talking about top 4 and the fact that we're not too far away from top 4, but that really shouldn't be our aim. And that's not really what we should be clinging on to. That's the situation we're in, and I don't think we will get top 4. But again, this isn't the standards at Manchester United. Then it moves on to Ten Hag says, oh yes, I'm sure the players are behind me, because he gets asked if the players are behind him. You can see, for instance, the comeback against Brentford and the Burnley game, the Fulham game. Every time the team is there, showed great character, great determination, resilience. So we are together. You can see you can't play such great football as we did recently without unity. I understand where he's coming from, but again, I go back to the point where Brentford, Burnley, Fulham, Erik, no disrespect to these teams, but they're not great teams. I respect all of the teams. I think all of them can play good football on the day, but they're not great teams. We never have ever, under Erik ten Hag, stood out against a top 6 side. We never have. Our players can't be bothered with it. We saw it in Newcastle. The players could not be bothered. We didn't want it as much as Newcastle did. That is massive alarm bells, Erik. And you're in charge of getting these players up for it, and you're in charge of the players being up for it and having that fight. And it's all right to do it against Brentford, Burnley and Fulham, where maybe it's not as difficult. But in the really difficult games, do our players stick together? Do our players come through it? Do they go to war? They don't. So, yeah, I do believe that a lot of that team are behind Erik ten Hag. I don't believe the fact that 50% of the dressing room are against him. I don't believe it. And by the way, everyone, don't take everything you hear as gospel, because half of these stories coming out with the sources that they've got, I just can't understand how they could be true. And if they are true, it's absolutely ridiculous. But there is clearly in that dressing room unrest. You could see it against Newcastle. You could see through body language on the pitch. You could see it with players on the bench. The bench looked not interested in the slightest. I get it's cold. I get it's an 8 o'clock kick-off on a Saturday night. I get the fact that you couldn't get the plane there. You had to get the coach for 3 hours. But the body language that we saw at the Newcastle game was not a team that's together, and it wasn't a team that looks like they're absolutely up for fighting for everything this season with the team. It just didn't. It looked like so many unhappy individual players. And I'm sure there'll be certain players in that dressing room that aren't a fan of what's going on. There's no smoke without fire. Of course there's not. You don't get all of these stories through nothing. And don't get me wrong, I'm not necessarily blaming Erik ten Hag for this. Erik ten Hag does have to take some responsibility for results and the way we're playing. But the players, some of the players that are there have sacked over 3 managers. It's the culture at Manchester United. When the going gets tough, you throw the manager under the bus to save yourself, and that's happening again, and these leaks are just ridiculous. And then Ten Hag got asked about the media outlet ban, and he says they should have come to us first and not go behind our back printing articles. That is not the right thing. We have a good relationship. They come to us beforehand and we have a debate about it. And for that, I was like, fair play, Erik, because realistically, the last thing we need right now as a club is media outlets leaking stories from leaks inside the dressing room that are just absolutely not helpful at all in this moment in time. The stories coming out about players doubting Erik ten Hag's signings, including the signing of Rasmus Højlund, about players thinking that they're running too much, about questioning Erik ten Hag's tactics, just all the leaks that are coming out, it's not helpful right now. And when these stories come out, I get that journalists have to be journalists, and when they have sources and they have a story, they're going to publish it. But at the same time, is it really necessary that now we have multiple stories coming out that are massively going against this manager and completely throwing him under the bus in a time where Manchester United need to really pull together to get through this period, because this team is in disarray. The manager is really under pressure, and we've got some horrible fixtures coming up, and it really is sink or swim. And I just think these stories coming out now, it's not helpful. And Erik doesn't help himself by not taking full accountability in these press conferences and playing the same plays over and over again. Like, I can't sit here and say Erik ten Hag talks about standards and setting standards and not crossing the line, and he implements that on certain things, but then you let Marcus Rashford walk onto the pitch, and he probably will start on Wednesday, when he's literally walked around and looked disinterested in the Newcastle game. So, Erik, it's all right talking about standards and being strict and not letting the outside noise affect you, but you're also going against you're contradicting some of your own points that you're telling us, and that's where people get frustrated a little bit. Because you can drop certain players for not doing the right things, but Rashford's walking around at St James's Park and he's probably going to start again on Wednesday. That's where you start to lose a few people, to be honest with you. We've got a super chat in saying, Beth, I think it's time to upgrade the Christmas tree. Decorations are on their way, everyone. Decorations are on their way for the Christmas tree. It will be decorated soon. Nigel says, Erik ten Hag will get the sack. The way he's blindly backing these bottle job players reminds me, Ollie, his aura is completely vanished. I think he has no choice but to kind of back him at the moment. Because at the moment, when you look at Erik ten Hag, there's two options. He can back the players like he is doing. And what happens if Ten Hag comes out and says, no, I'm not happy with this, I'm not happy with that, and he does throw the players under the bus to the media? That's going to wind people up more, and that's going to... At the end of the day, he needs them players to go out at the weekend and run for him and do the work for him. He can't go and play that game for himself. So he needs the players behind him, and he knows that. He's part of man management. He could be completely backing the players to the media, but behind closed doors, in meetings, be saying the complete opposite thing. We don't know. We don't know right now, but this is the situation we're in on that sense of things. Anyway, the next bit, he says, Ten Hag asked if he's concerned about the stories that could be true, and he says, no, of course, they are normal, always. Every team has players who are not playing, who are not happy. Not different as normal. You have to wait for the chance, and that can come, but there are no issues. So he says he's not concerned that the stories could be true, and basically he thinks that the only players that have unrest within the Manchester United squad are players that aren't happy because of the lack of game time, which is understandable because this happens in every single club. And let's be honest, Erik ten Hag is going to be looking at all of the stories that are coming out, and of course he's going to be concerned. Manchester United, no matter what Erik ten Hag comes out and says in these press conferences about us beating... I think he's talked about the comeback about the Brentford game in every single press conference since. Well done. You came back at home against Brentford and won 2-1. Like, we're Manchester United. These are not the levels. That can't be spoken about in every single press conference. Like, so this shows that our players are working hard enough. Well, no, it's not. Because we've gone away from home against the top 9 in 2 seasons back to back and not won a single game. That is so beyond rubbish. And you're coming back to this Brentford game about this shows the comeback, this shows the resilience. That was weeks ago. We're talking about now. And it's a lot of this play style, it isn't working. We are conceding way too many shots. Thankfully, we've started to score goals. That's something that has changed. But we look so disorganised. Our midfield looks like it can get walked through by anybody. Newcastle absolutely turned up and showed us how to play football, and they won every single battle on the pitch. So you can keep talking about results against the Brentfords and the Fulhams and the Lutons, but realistically, what's happening right now, it isn't working. Erik ten Hag is going to be concerned about. There's so many stories, and I say this, don't believe everything as gospel. I do think a lot of these stories, I wouldn't say, from my opinion, I don't think there's much truth in them. But there's no smoke without fire. And Erik ten Hag will know this, and he will be feeling it, and he will be thinking, how do I get these players back on side? How do I turn things around? How do I turn the corner? And what I did really like was Andy Mitten tweeted, I think it was yesterday, saying he had a long sit-down interview with Erik ten Hag for his newspaper, United We Stand, and he walked out of there thinking that he really wants Erik ten Hag to continue as the Manchester United manager, and he's trying to turn things around, and he cares about the club, and he's trying to instill standards. This is what we have to go by. This is why I say, people who want Erik ten Hag gone, people who want to change to a different manager, I understand you. I get why you'd want that, because we've not been playing well, and ultimately it does come down to the manager. And it's hard to see Erik ten Hag's tactics. It's hard to see the style of play right now. The in-game management's been poor. The signings don't like they've worked out. I get all of this. But Erik ten Hag has walked into that club and he's trying to change the culture. It was a mess when he walked through the door, and you don't just turn it glowy overnight. I think he needs time to continue with this. I honestly do, because the club's had a toxic atmosphere around it for so long, and the culture has been to be late to training, like Man Utd said, probably a lot of the time without consequence, for players to be able to get away with certain things. I mean, the players are bothered about running and training. That shows how long this culture of laziness has gone on at the club. Ten Hag's trying to turn it around. I think we have to stick by him instead of going with the players again and getting a new manager in for the same cycle to repeat itself. Anyway, we get to the next bit, and he says, I always listen to my players, and I always give them opportunities to tell. If the players have a different opinion, of course, I will listen. Maybe one or two have told me, but about it in general, the majority want to play like this, proactive, dynamic and brave. and that is what they want. This was him answering the question about the players not being happy with the running in training, not being happy with the tactics, and have they spoke to Erik ten Hag about changing that? And he says he always will listen to his players, he always gives them opportunities. Maybe one or two have spoke to him, but about in general, the majority want to play proactive, dynamic, brave. That is what they want. So Erik ten Hag feels like he's playing the way that these players want to play, and to his knowledge, none of them have told him otherwise that that isn't the case. And by the way, if the players didn't want to play like that, Erik ten Hag's the manager. Manager, players. Managers, players. Like, the fact that I saw a story yesterday that the players have been telling Erik ten Hag how things need to change. I'm sorry. Have you gone and got all of your coaching badges and been experienced of being a manager? The players are there to listen to the manager and instill the style of play that Erik ten Hag wants and instill the tactic that Erik ten Hag wants. And if you don't get on with the manager or you can't do that, then we've seen what happens with the likes of Jadon Sancho. And that's the way it should be. I'm not saying that it should be a dictatorship, because it shouldn't. Of course, players should be allowed to give their opinions and should be able to work with the manager. But the players shouldn't be going against the manager, and that's the difference here. And could you imagine back in the day if David Beckham was like, yeah, Sir Alex, I don't think we should be playing like this sort of football. Yeah, this is how I think it should be done. He wouldn't play another minute. Genuinely. And I get that Sir Alex had so much behind him, and he had so much credit in the bank that nobody would dare sort of question that. But the respect between a manager and the players should still remain the same. And I get that it's a different generation, a different time, but Erik ten Hag is the manager and he should be listened to, and the players should follow that. And maybe if the players are all in on that and they are questioning whether things should be different, maybe that's why what we're seeing we are on the pitch. For stuff to work, you have to be 100% committed, and I don't know if all of them players are. Well, actually, I know that they're probably not. A lot of people are saying to turn the mic up. I don't know. I'll ask about that. Yeah, I think it is sorted. I think that is sorted now. But moving on to the next quote. He says that you can see that the players are behind the philosophy because of the performances against Everton and Galatasaray. We are really improving. We can't make the goal we did against Everton if the players don't embrace it. And I get it, but this is where I was watching the press conference and I was like, no. Honestly, in the chat, do you guys think we're improving? Do you guys think that we're improving? Watching us this week, I didn't think we're improving at all. Against Everton, a brilliant wonder goal by Garnacho, individual brilliance, a penalty, and then I thought it was some really good individual play from players that I've seen do that before, with the likes of Martial, Bruno, Pellistri, to build up for the third goal. And I thought we were really lucky not to concede. Galatasaray. Okay, yeah, we played some good football, but we also got ran through and conceded way too many opportunities. Newcastle, probably one of the worst performances I've ever seen. And I know it was only 1-0, but no word of a lie, it could have been 9-0. Like, it could have been. So I don't think we're improving. The one thing you could say we're improving at is we're actually scoring goals, which we haven't been able to. But that's 2 games. That's not really that big of a sample size. And then against Newcastle, you just completely revert back to type, and we can't even pull off a counter-attacking plan very well. The issue I have at the moment is, and I've said it before, against Newcastle, we went there with the game plan of sitting in, defending, and then trying to counter-attack. It didn't pay off. We barely even counter-attacked, but that's what we did. Why? Spurs are decimated with injury and they're going toe-to-toe with City, the best team in the world. And they managed to get a draw out of it. I'd so much rather go to St James's Park, turn up to these games. Erik ten Hag's game plan, we follow it completely. We're at it. We're doing what we do as a football club. We're doing it the Man United way, whatever Erik ten Hag's Man United way is, every single game. Whether you have the players to do it or not, do it every game. None of this sitting in and counter-attacking rubbish against the top teams that we can't even get results off anyway because you failed in the last 2 years to get them away from home. Let's play your style of football every week. And if we lose, we lose. But at least we're doing something that's going to get us somewhere in the future. What we're doing now is survival football. that's not going to build into any sort of future. And that's my issue. And I don't feel like we have improved. I feel like we've improved at scoring goals, but I don't think we've improved. Ten Hag on disorder, he said there's no disorder in the dressing room. Of course, there are a lot of rumours, but it's not that we get distracted by it. I mean, he's not going to turn around and say there is he? But if there's no disorder in the dressing room, which I don't believe really, I think there's got to be some sort of unrest. It'd be silly not to be any unrest right now when we're losing so many games that we shouldn't lose, or we're not even competing in certain games. It's one of them. Ten Hag's got a big job in his hands to try and turn this around. Ten Hag says we are on a journey, on a route. We know we are in transition. We are at the right direction. We construct a team, develop it. The team is progressing. Young players coming in, and you see the potential on how they can contribute to a successful Manchester United team for the future. I mean, we are on a journey. I understand that, and I've said so many times that the journey isn't going to be smooth sailing. It's not a hill where you just go in up and up and up and up and up. That isn't going to happen. When you're in a rebuild and you come into such an environment that is unsustainable to create a winning team, and an environment where standards have been on the floor for years, you don't just come in overnight and change things. But what I will say is, at this point in the journey, things have to be different. The one thing that bothers me, of course I want to see results, of course I want to see points on the board, of course I want to see us score goals. But the one thing that bothers me is that I don't see a style of play. I think I know what Erik ten Hag wants to do. I actually don't think what Erik ten Hag wants to do is going to work if he is going to persist with the 2-10s. I don't know if that's going to work in the Premier League. But Erik ten Hag's style of play, I couldn't tell you what it is. We don't play the same every game. We play differently. There's always something different depending on the opposition. And it's just, I don't know where we're going. That's the issue with it. If we lost against Newcastle, we lost against Galatasaray, or drew against Galatasaray, but I could see the way that we're trying to go about things, and certain things just aren't clicking yet, and maybe, we are missing a few players from injury, I'd understand it more. But I'm 18 months into the project and I don't see what we're trying to achieve on the pitch. That's my issue right now. So I get that his answer, we're on a journey, we're on a route, understand that, but where are we trying to go? Please show me on the football pitch. I'd have so much more respect for Erik ten Hag if he just played exactly the way he wants to play every single game and implemented the style he wants. Whether he's got Martinez, whether he's not got Martinez, whether he needs a certain style of player in this area of the pitch, just work with what you've got. Ange Postecoglou's doing it at Spurs, and he's got a decimated squad. And yeah, he's lost a few games, but he's not backing down his principles, because what would be the point? He's just delaying it. You're just not moving forward. He then says, we are not... Right, so this is the interesting one. Andy Mitten, I think it was, asked him about the fact that players were accused of not tracking back in the media, of being lazy, of basically not putting the work in against Newcastle. I'm not wording that absolutely correct, but he got asked something along them lines, and Ten Hag said, we are not robots. If you play 3 games in 6 days, tough games, and by the end, the fatigue can be an issue. Never an excuse, but it is there. But against Galatasaray, against Everton, we played very good. Against Newcastle, we were not happy with our performance. We are the first to say. The players are the first. We are so self-critical. 2 issues I have with that. The first issue is we didn't play well against Galatasaray and Everton, in my opinion. I don't think they're the standards. And he says that we played very good. I don't think we did. And my second issue is, and I wish they followed up with this, the exact same team that played against Manchester United for Newcastle on Saturday played 3 games straight in a row, the exact same starting 11, and they went to PSG away. There's no excuse. We made rotations. Rashford hadn't played midweek. So, yeah, I get it. The players aren't robots. But how come Newcastle can turn up 3 games in a row with the exact same starting 11? I think Newcastle had to put 2 or 3 keepers on the bench because they don't even have enough senior players to make the bench right now. I think they have like 18 or 14 senior squad players injured. yeah, they're battling in every single competition and they completely outdid us. I get they're at home, but it doesn't matter. There is no excuse for the fatigue. I'm sorry, there just isn't, especially when you see the way Newcastle played. And then he got asked about Marcus Rashford and how Marcus Rashford is feeling, because obviously he's got a lot of criticism this week. He said, everybody is disappointed. We saw the Galatasaray performance and the result in Newcastle. We are not the only team to lose there. They win all the games except for Liverpool, but we want to win there and we did everything in our power, but definitely our performance wasn't good enough. Again, I get it, like Newcastle is a tough place to go and we've had a tough week, but there's no excuse. We've not won away against the top nine teams in 2 seasons, and to say we did everything in our power, I know for a fact we didn't, because I watched the game. I watched players walking. I watched players not tracking back. I watched players maybe not know in certain instances where they should be covering and what positions they should be in. So I don't look at that and look at that game and think every person in that team did everything in their power to win the game, because that's not the case. The performance was atrocious. It really, really was. One of the worst I've seen, and it could have been an 8-0. It generally could. The scoreline massively, massively flattered us. So we are disappointed. And in that instance, I would have liked Erik ten Hag to say it's unacceptable, the way we played. We know it's unacceptable. I don't want to make excuses about how no one's won there this season apart from Liverpool, because Liverpool did win there with 10 men, actually. It was a freak game. But with Manchester United, the standards should be up here, especially considering we can't buy a win against the top 9 teams in the Premier League away from home. So it is disappointing, but when you hear the same thing every single time it happens, there's not really much to say. I'd kind of want something a little bit different in that answer. But he's going to back the players, and that's the only thing he really can do now, because he's got some super important games coming up where the players have to be behind him. We have a super chat from Sean Turner. You can't compare being Spurs manager to United manager. We have injuries. It's no excuse. Spurs get injuries, lose to Wolves, Villa and Chelsea in a row. Do that at United and you're under pressure. At Spurs, you aren't. Yeah, very good point, Sean. Very good point, to be honest. Cliff says, so Beth, you think he should throw the players under the bus? I know the reaction would be if you did that. No, I don't think he should. And I said I know exactly why he's protecting the players, because you're going to. Sir Alex Ferguson used to do it. Sir Alex Ferguson never really used to throw any players under the bus in the media. He'd do it behind closed doors. But it's not that I want Ten Hag to come out and talk about individuals. I don't. But I do want him to hold us more accountable. I don't want him to say, you know, we're not robots about fatigue. I want him to say, I've spoken to the team about how Newcastle had the same starting 11 3 games in a row and how they were able to emulate that performance. And I've asked them why we weren't able to do that, why they feel like we weren't able to do that. I've asked them how they think they can improve. I've spoke to them about the standards of having to play for Manchester United. I know that wasn't acceptable. I know the performance wasn't acceptable. We really have to change this, especially against the top teams in the league. I just wish he would be a little bit more accountable for what the fans have seen over the past few weeks, because we've sat through some absolute shockers of performances, to be honest. And it's not, like I said, you can lose football games. I have no issues with that. Losing at St James's Park, it's the case for any team. City could go there and lose, and they have lost there before. The best team in the world could go there and lose. St James's Park's a really tough place to go. It's not about winning or losing. I mean, obviously you want to get the points. It's about the performance. It's about the effort levels. It's about when you're paying, I mean, I pay over £800 for a season ticket every year, and I'm turning up to see players turn their back and walk. That's the problem that we're having, and that does need to be held accountable, to be honest with you, because it's not fair on the fans. Chris says, Beth, it is not fitness, it is desire, and this core group have no desire. Brack said the players are feeling the pressure, and that's good. I mean, are the players feeling the pressure? They know that the manager gets sacked, and they don't. That's the way it's always been, and that's the way it is in football. But I really hope that Erik ten Hag doesn't suffer the same fate that the other managers have. And I know a lot of people are wanting it. I know that, but I honestly believe it would be a mistake, and I might be wrong. I've been wrong on a lot of things, as you guys would know. But I do think it would be the wrong decision to get rid of him now, especially when he's finally starting to make a dent. Sometimes in the long run, you have to go through difficult periods to reach the end goal. And Arsenal went through it with Arteta. Other teams have gone through it before when you're in the course of a rebuild. I really do feel like we have to stick this moment out with Erik ten Hag, or else the players ultimately win. Philip Walton says, Newcastle haven't got players throwing the manager under the bus. Yeah, interesting stuff. The one thing I would say is, I was watching TalkSport this morning, and I think it was Darren Bent I saw on there, and he was saying, they were talking about the Rashford situation. He was basically saying, you know, Rashford should be able to lean on Bruno, but Bruno, he's probably having a stinker, and Bruno should be able to lean on Varane, but Varane's sat on the bench and that sort of stuff. And I'm like, Rashford should have to lean on Bruno. I get Bruno as the captain. Bruno gave him a penalty at Everton last week. Bruno's constantly trying to get Rashford up and running. You can see that. So them sort of things just frustrate me because, one, they're not true. And I also saw him say that he thinks we should sack Ten Hag now. And there's a lot of people with that opinion. And he said, get Ancelotti through the door straight away. And I feel like saying, like, do you really think that changes Manchester United? Ancelotti's a brilliant manager, by the way. But there's people out there that actually think that if Ancelotti walks through the door tomorrow, that's United. They're going to be back to the top. It's not going to happen. Behind the scenes, it's a mess. It's a mess. It has been for a while. Ten Hag is trying to change that, as I'm sure another strong, good manager would do if they came in as well. But they're going to encounter the same problems that the last 5 managers encountered. Because this, behind the scenes, Man United has turned into a place where it's not an environment. It's not a winning environment. Nemanja Matic came out and did an interview and said players were late. At Chelsea, they were professional. They turned up on time. At Man United, it was the norm to be late. This is the difference. And by the way, fair play to Nemanja Matic for bringing that up and speaking about it, because it needs to be spoken about. So, of course, Ancelotti, by the way, Ancelotti is a brilliant manager. And I think he is an absolutely brilliant manager. But the fact that there's actually people out there that think getting rid of Ten Hag and bringing a new manager in will just change the whole club that's been rotting for 10 years plus, it just won't happen. It honestly just won't happen. It's a really long thing that we're going to have to go through. Because guess what? When you cause so much damage, it takes a while to undo that damage and progress forward. Mario Franco says, it doesn't matter the manager or the players who come in. We will never be good enough if we don't clear out the trash, board, players, staff, all of this lot. And then again, a lot of people saying, you know, Beth, the goalkeeper's costing us that you asked to bring in. First of all, yes, Anana's not been great. Absolutely agree with you on that. He's not been very good at all, to be honest. But he's not the reason we are where we are. It's no individual's fault. It's like, I'm so frustrated with Rashford right now because I know he can do better and I expect more from a player that claims he's a fan of the club. Who is a fan of the club? It's not all Rashford's fault. It's nobody's individual fault. I've seen so many people going in on Anthony Martial this weekend and this week, saying the problem is Anthony Martial's still at the club. Anthony Martial doesn't run. Anthony Martial, whatever your opinion is on Martial, and I don't really have that much of a high on it at the moment. I've always thought he's a good player, but his performance against Newcastle was terrible, and he's not been consistent enough for Manchester United for years. But Anthony Martial has barely played this season. He's been a bench player. He's played a few games, got a few starts. By the way, in Everton and Crystal Palace starts, he ended up scoring a goal. But he has one terrible game against Newcastle, which, by the way, everybody had a terrible game against Newcastle. And all of a sudden, we're at this point where Anthony Martial's the problem. What about Rashford, who's on 350 grand a week, who's been playing 90 minutes since the start of the season, who has been terrible since the start of the season? We're going to pin all the blame on him too. All the blame isn't on him. It's on a lot of players, but instead of scapegoating one player who's been scapegoated for years and we know probably doesn't have a future at the club and barely actually plays that often as a starter, why don't we start looking at the starting 11 if we're going to individualise players? But I'm not saying we should individualise players because it's no individual's fault. It's a team thing. It's a mentality thing. It's a culture thing that's been running through that club. Ten Hag's made some bad decisions from a coaching aspect, from an in-game management aspect, and he has contradicted himself in a lot of things he said. And I'm not happy with his overall performance this season either. But he is trying to change that culture, and it is going to take time. And I do think sacking and repeating right now, for me, it's just not the option. Not the option that I think we should go down. Andy Tutel says, Rashford didn't play against Galatasaray, so there was no fatigue excuse for Rashford's glaring lack of effort against Newcastle. He just wasn't bothered. No passion, no effort, no desire to win. Dylan, thank you very much for your super chats. He says that the club is so depressing at the moment. I just want our club back to winning things. Nothing will change. Dylan, I agree. It is depressing, but you know, this is what it is as Man United fans. We're at this point, it's like, as Man United fans, if you're a Man United fan, I know you're a strong person. I really do, because every single week it is torturous, isn't it? Mario Frankso says, it doesn't matter the manager or players who come in, we will never be good enough if we don't collect the trash. I've done that one as well. Thank you for the super chats. Beth, be honest, Martial hasn't just had a terrible game, he's had 4 to 6 terrible seasons. No, I understand, Martial isn't good enough for the future. I get it. He's not been good enough over his period of Man United. But the reason we're failing this year at Manchester United isn't because of Anthony Martial. The reason that we have had all of these poor results is because we've kept Anthony Martial. Because Anthony Martial has started a few games for us this season. That's the reason we're failing. It's not. Martial, I think, is a brilliant player. I don't think he's performed brilliantly for us consistently. I don't. But the reason we're failing this season isn't because of Anthony Martial. We've got to look at the players who are playing week in, week out in that team, but they don't get a mention. Martial's been scapegoated from pillar to post. Finally, to be fair, Rashford started to get some criticism this week in the media. But Rashford's just had a new contract. He's on 350 grand a week, or 325 grand a week, whatever it is. And he can't be bothered to run. And he's not putting in the performances week in, week out. But we've only just started hearing about it now. Martial is constantly berated in the media. Yeah, okay, he's not good enough, but he's not the reason that we're losing games. And I'm not saying Rashford's the reason we're losing games either. It's a whole collective thing, and it shouldn't be individualised on one player. Martial been here for 8 years, people are saying, and last 10 minutes, Amrabat, the match change, says Ed Woe. I mean, that is it on the Erik ten Hag press conference. I honestly hope to God that Erik ten Hag manages to get a result tomorrow at home to Chelsea. It's going to be a really interesting game to see where the players are at. I hope so much that them players come out fighting for Erik ten Hag, that we see players covering every single yard of grass and trying to put right the performance that we saw at the weekend. I'm not convinced that we're going to see that. As for the leaks of the club, someone just asked me who I think the leaks are. I don't know, to be honest with you. I really don't know. People used to tell me it was Pogba. Pogba's not here anymore. People used to tell me it was Lingard. Lingard isn't here anymore. I'm not sure if individual players are the leaks, because the leaks could be coming from, it could be players coming home speaking to friends and family. They're going leaking to the media. It could be, inside staff at Manchester United that are leaking it. We don't know who is leaking this stuff. Somebody is, and that's an issue. We've had leaks for years. But at the same time, I don't know, I can't guess who the individual players are, but whoever they are, it needs weaning out. And I'm sure Erik ten Hag will be really disappointed in the stuff that he's hearing today. At the end of the day, we are a mess right now. Of course, there's blame that you can put on Erik ten Hag, but massive, massive, massive blame, and just scrutiny has to come onto the players for what they've delivered, because yes, Erik ten Hag hasn't been at the races this season when it comes to his management as a coach at Manchester United and his in-game management, but the players have really, really let him down on numerous occasions. But then again, if you were a player and you saw certain individuals starting every week and walking about, you'd think you could do the same. But everyone, thank you for watching the Erik ten Hag press conference coverage with us. I've got some exciting news for you. The first bit of exciting news is that our Christmas show is just under a week away. Monday the 11th of December, the Christmas show in Manchester, the night before Christmas, not so silent night, the night before the Bayern Munich game. every single person from the United stand will be at this Christmas show. I've seen the plan of what the show's going to consist of. It's going to be an absolute belter. Mark will be here, everyone will be here. Make sure you go and get your tickets for that. I think there's very few tickets remaining, so go in and snap them up before they all go. And the second bit of exciting news, this is really exciting. The call-in show will be back at 4 p.m, but our special guest is my special guest co-host for the call-in show, answering your calls, having a conversation with you guys, is the absolute goat of the United stand. It is Ricky. Ricky is going to be on the 4 p.m. call-in show with me. He's been absolutely gagging to do one. He's been watching him. He loves the call-in shows. He loves listening to your guys' opinions, and he wanted to jump on one. I said, Ricky, I would absolutely love that, and he's coming down to the studio and he's jumping on the call-in show. So make sure you click the link in the Discord, join, wait in the queue, try and get in the queue to call up, and you could be speaking to the GOAT Ricky himself. You can ask him all about his opinion on Ashley Young being better than Wan-Bissaka. You can ask him about Johnny Evans. You can ask him anything. So make sure you come and jump onto that at 4 p.m. Literally in an hour and a half, we'll be back. So thank you everyone for watching. Hit a like on the video on your way out. And yeah, let's just say a little prayer on our way out that Manchester United will start to improve. And I will start to decorate the Christmas tree as well. For every win Man United get, maybe we'll add another bauble. It'll still be balled by after Christmas is finished at this rate, looking at our fixtures. But thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.